Dear Joyce, we're back.
Here we are. Here we are.
We're
How are you, man?
we're we're defying our consistently inconsistent. So this is 2 weeks in a row. I feel like, I don't, I've been doing duo. I think I'm on like day 370. So I think you and I need to like do the shot streak, like the streak
Right.
thing that keeps me going. So, but anyway.
And do we get to buy, freezes?
You know,
What's the
that's
deal?
that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. We'll figure the gamification out. But
Yeah.
yeah, listen, all good here. Just hustling and heading out to Chicago next week. Looking forward to seeing a bunch of people there,
Excellent.
including heading out to the Accenture Health Tech Challenge. So just shout out to Brian Callis, who I met up in Minneapolis just a week and a half-ish or two ago. Time flies.
Great.
So that's it. And anyway, and yourself?
All good. All good. I'm just happy to be on the phone with you, trying to
You're
catch a
you're
Wi-Fi
always
signal.
I was gonna say you're always moving, but as you're moving, let our guest in.
Excellent.
So Ryan is going to join us from the West Coast. So Ryan and I got introduced by Amanda, who, by the way, as we chat, I'm like, oh, we should, we had Amanda on. I really thought we had Amanda on. So Amanda introduced us, and I texted Amanda saying, we realized, you and I, that we never had Amanda on. So we'll have her on, even though we never disclose a future guest. But shout out to Amanda. Ryan, welcome. Welcome to the Shot of
Hey,
Visibility.
thanks for having me. Good to see you, Gene. Nice to meet you, Jim. You guys were mentioning Amanda, so
Yeah.
that would be a better get than I am.
Oh, this is a great get. Nice to
We
meet
should,
you, Ryan. I've heard a lot about you.
now that I think about it, we should have had the both of you on. However, the goal here is to get to know our guest, one at a time. Typically, I think we've tried. I still remember one of the episodes with Matthew Holt and Justin Massa, which was the biggest mess ever. I think all of us people that love to talk. But anyway, let's welcome to the shot. And I think you were texting me that you watched enough of our banter, knowing how long it's going to take you to be allowed into from the waiting room. So for the millions of listeners and viewers, tell us who Ryan is. All the way from childhood, or you can start from yesterday. Up to you, man.
Yeah, well, great being on, and I really appreciate the time. So I'm a benefits consultant here at Marsh McLennan. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. Started my career at Aetna, where I was studying economics and math in college, and was actually thinking about becoming an actuary. And so Aetna actually has a pretty cool actuary training program, and I missed the deadline by a few weeks, and somehow stumbled into sales. So Aetna
Yeah, it's
actually
typical. I think that's
I'm sorry,
typical,
what?
right? That's typical actuary to sales. That's pretty
Yeah,
typical.
exactly. The old actuary joke is, how can you tell an introverted actuary versus an extroverted actuary? They're looking at your shoelaces versus their own. So I stumbled into Aetna, and they had this really great college training program called Group School that they had actually been developed since like the 1920s. And so that was like my taste into insurance and this whole complicated industry that we're all in. I started my career in that, always selling in the commercial space to employers through the broker channels. So had to really quickly get up to speed on how is the business run. And then right around the mid-10s, when we were all kind of feeling what digital transformation looked like, and when the Livongos, Omadas, Hinges of the world started popping up, Aetna decided that they wanted to get into the consumer health space, try to disrupt healthcare from within. And so I took a leap of faith, and I decided to jump onto that team. And really had a great experience from that point on. When CVS acquired Aetna, my role became larger, where we were now trying to disrupt the whole company, figuring out where we could build out new products and services both to create better member experiences, but to also think through like clinical outcomes. So I was involved with a lot of projects from the Aetna side, the Caremark side, and the CVS Health side. But really great exposure to like how the company and the different three arms of the company really are run. Right around COVID, and I told Eugene this, because my team sat at the cross section of the whole org, we were asked to be part of the COVID task force. And so we did a lot of COVID conversations all day, every day for those years. And so that led me to Marsh McLennan, and actually that led me to looking for a change. I think always having a passion for disrupting healthcare, improving kind of like how we look at the system, wanted to see what else was out there, and ultimately came across Marsh because of a lot of close friends of mine, and now co-lead the digital health practice here, where I work with a lot of digital health companies for their own employee benefits and helping them attract and retain the right talent so they can go ahead and do what we're all trying to do, which is really think through the mission of improving healthcare, health outcomes, access, and all of that stuff.
Awesome.
Let's back all the way up. So first of all, while you were talking, because you said 1920, the program was built, and I'm like, I actually quite like, how old is Aetna? It's 171 years old. Holy crap! Like I don't know. I never thought about it, but as you mentioned it. So, and then you said the magic word. Kind of think of healthcare, right? Stodgy, bureaucratic, and then the word consumer that moves, right? And Aetna is not the only one that had a lot of the efforts, right? I mean, I think Optum had it, /United, I think every one of them. So I'm curious what kind of the hypothesis was, and to the extent that you can talk about it, love to learn, some of the lessons learned, right? Like what did consumer mean for Aetna?
Yeah, and I think at the time, what it really meant was like thinking through digital front doors, thinking through what a member experience was, making it easier for people to access care, make affordable care, and really allow people to do what they want to do, and partner with them on their health journeys. And so, taking your step back out of like the business of healthcare and like actually how we experiencing it. It was really just trying to reimagine like what should a member experience look like when you're actually trying to interact with insurance companies, providers, and the system as a whole.
Yeah.
And so I was gonna say one of the products that we actually tried to build, that we built out, was an advocacy program. And so it's thinking through the clinical service aspects of like when a member calls into Aetna. They're calling for a reason. So let's uncover what that reason is and see if we can have a conversation and get them to the right place at the right time.
Jim, I know you were going to ask.
Well, yeah, I was going to go way back. I was going to what inspired the actuary side? I mean, obviously you're incredibly bright, but what inspired it? Was it someone in your family? Was it a good job?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. My uncle is an actuary, or actuary by trade. He's retired now, but it was growing up in that space and seeing the kind of business of it. My mom was a CPA for a number of years, and then she was CFO for a small little business. And so I kind of got the business acumen and the actuarial acumen from that side of the family. My dad was a professor of pharmacy at UCSF for over 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I tried to just like split the middle. I didn't go into clinical or business. I was like, I like healthcare business. And so that's how I ended up here.
And where are you right now? Where are you located?
I'm in San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Jim is gathering data points for his famous question. I know it. I know it.
That you got to talk about the move to sales. Okay, you have to give us a little more detail other than you just went from actuary to sales.
Yeah, it's funny because I went through the interview process, and it was a pretty lengthy interview process where I interviewed a number of different folks across the organization. Apparently there were over like 1,000 applicants from out of college, and I was one of 8 selected. I was the only person on the West Coast, and I still keep in contact with a lot of my group school counterparts, and they're all industry leaders now. It's pretty interesting and fun. But when I was looking at the job description for the sales role, I didn't actually know it was a sales role. It was an account exec, and probably looking back, I should probably wouldn't know what it was, but this job description was must be analytical and knows how to develop relationships. And I'm like, well, that seems easy enough. And so that's how I stumbled into sales.
Fantastic. And did you like it?
I loved it. I think the sales process, especially from the carrier side into the broker side, is a lot of relationship driven business. And I think the comp to where we look at like the startup space, the point solution space, and trying to sell to employers, it's a very similar comp. So I have a lot of insights when I'm talking to a lot of my clients and prospects, because it is heavy on the relationships. The execution really matters when you actually get the go live. And I think understanding that dynamic and understanding like the long sales cycle of healthcare really matters, because it's something that you just can't jump in and jump out. Like these are long cultivated relationships where when your consultant or broker is thinking about, those changes or those strategies, you have to be the person that comes to mind at that right time.
Yep. I love how you went
Great.
all the way back, Jim, and I just jumped to the whole consumer thing. Aetna consumer. It's fascinating to me, right? Because that kind of CVS Aetna, right? It's just again, CVS just truly in the front. You walk downstairs, there's a CVS almost in every corner in any city, right? So, but yeah, it's maybe today, right? Let's keep going, Ryan. Benefit consultant. So what is, yes, it's relationships, yes, it's working with companies, but what does a day in a benefit consultant role look like? And we don't need all the gory details, by the way.
All the gory details. So for all the listeners that are trying to sell into employers, like how do you talk to like me and my counterparts?
There you go.
So I think from like a producing standpoint, it is really about like just networking and finding the right opportunities and being in the room when you're not in the room. And so being thought of as that thought leader and strategic partner. For our clients and for like the vendors that are thinking about working with the brokers, it's really developing relationships with those client service teams that ultimately are doing the day-to-day servicing of our clients, because they're the ones that I partner with and that I truly rely on for driving the strategy and carrying a lot of that forward. So I think it's kind of twofold. It's one, you partner with folks like us because we're connectors and we can bring a lot of commonalities into the room, but then two, focusing on how do you make those relationships and have partnerships with those client service teams, so that again, when you're not in the room and we're having client conversations with finance, HR, we are thinking about you in a strategic way.
Can I double click on the word producer? I actually heard it elsewhere in the brokerage community, and I was taken aback because I've never actually I never thought of it that way, right? But can you just double click how did that come about? Is that like a culture?
No, it's I think it's indicative of kind of the broker consultant landscape of like, how do you grow the business and how do you get new logos in the door? And so a lot of the business model of brokeraging and consulting is very similar to like financial advising almost, where you're building a network, you're building a community, and you're hoping to bring that community together and get referrals.
Interesting. When you think about like Eugene and I, as in I'm sure yourself too, Ryan, as like digital health tech innovators, and the fact it felt like that the employer space played such an important part in getting the first digital health tools into the marketplace. Like that seemed where like if there was innovation happening, it kind of seemed like it was there. Is
Yeah.
that true, or is that a myth, or is that a good place to bring in innovative tools?
I think yes, and the dynamic of when these digital health companies started out, let's say 10 years ago, the market has dramatically shifted in terms of how you think about go to market almost, because these point solutions didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, and HR, finance, and employers, plan sponsors were hoping for different solutions and looking for changes to improve outcomes and lower their costs. I think fast forward to now, there's such a proliferation of point solutions in the marketplace. It becomes point solution fatigue for a lot of employers. And for the brokers and consultants, you have to really find where the gems are that are going to drive very specific ROIs or VOIs for their use cases. I think to go directly to employer space for a new company today, I think has its pros and cons, because I think the market is very saturated.
It's interesting, the idea of point solution, right? And like rewind, a decade ago, because of, let's face it, right? Large health systems, very broad health plans integrating, horizontally and vertically, moving slow. And the concept of it was take a therapeutic area and, do what you do best, right? Like the best of breed decision. I think the challenge, fast forward today, that you sort of touched on is that, the best of breed, the employers don't know what really that means anymore, right? Because there's so many, and numbers speak for themselves ultimately. And so it always becomes a decision, is it best of breed, or do I just contract with one party? And, some of the stuff could be subpar, but at least I got one throat to choke, as I call it, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's a fair assessment.
When you think of, like, Ryan, if we can go here, like when you think about return on investment, right? Where were the, like, there's the promise, when you put a solution together, you put a really, every digital health company or tool has in their own minds, they wouldn't be starting the company if they didn't have a really strong return on investment, right? So where does it kind of, is it adoption? Where's the challenges in getting return on investment to the employers, or how you might look at that?
Yeah, I kind of look at it in a couple different ways. So if you're looking at pure dollars and cents, right? The return on investment is, let's say for MSK, right? Did we lower our MSK spend? Are people avoiding surgeries, and are they doing the physical therapy in a way that is getting that member the care that they need, or potentially, delaying that care at a point where they actually do need it. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, I would say, is when you're looking at ROIs, are we, and this probably goes back to more VOI, like, are our members actually getting value out of it, right? And when you're doing surveys, what is that member experience, or what does that patient experience look like? And should we continue paying for that experience? And so there's a lot of different ways you can kind of look at that, but ultimately it's a conversation about culture with finance and HR, about who you want to be as an organization and what you want to offer to your employees to support kind of those diverse needs.
We find that the whole employer market, and we had the pleasure of being part of the EHIR, the academy, so the younger one, a while back. And one of the things that they said was, you meet one employer, right? And the decision-making processes. Now, at one point, I challenged that a little bit. I think it's industry specific more so than, and maybe size specific. So it's not truly the one employer. But having said that, it's one of those markets, and I'll put out. I spoke to Shawn Ellis from distributed ventures. And it's one of those markets that it seems like you literally got to be everywhere, right? There's no like, oh, here's the channel, right? It's a yes, yes, and yes. And we actually met, I think, Brook West, chief commercial officer. I forget the company name, starts with a C, clinical company, but she used the word surround sound. You got to be like surround sound in the employer space. As a benefit consultant, how do you think about that ecosystem? And ultimately, I mean, you're also selling to employers, right?
Yeah.
Right. So.
No, I think it's true. I mean, I think what HR and what finance want is simplicity, right? One outcomes and one simplicity. But you do need to, when you're thinking about what that surround sound looks like, it's building the right components that are integrated and easy to use so that at the end of the day, take all the other noise out of like actually how you're building it. What is my employee experience looking like? Is my employee accessing the right care at the right cost? And I think those are the big picture items that I think collectively we focus on. And then you can wrap, when you talk about surround sound, then you can wrap all the other things together. But when we're thinking about like just healthcare costs in general, I think one of the biggest issues that we have kind of systemically in healthcare is that we look at healthcare costs from a year-by-year basis, right? And so unless your employer or your plan sponsor has really long retention, where they're going to get the benefits of that upfront cost because they're retaining that employee down the road. A lot of instances, if there's just high turnover and maybe not great culture for that, it doesn't make sense to actually have that surround sound because they're not getting the, Jim, back to your point, their ROI in investing day one because their employees might be going somewhere else in year 1 or 2.
This is like spoken like almost like an actuary, right? Just without the actual numbers. I love it. And so what are you hearing, right? Because I think, I don't know where you spend most of your time, kind of mid-market, smaller SMB or jumbo. I think there's also differences in how the buyers buy, right? Some are more sophisticated than others. So I don't know where you personally spending the time or where you can talk about, would love to kind of hear, I mean, for the audience, what are you hearing from the employers, today? I don't mean literally today, but
I work anywhere from, these pre-seed, seed, Series A companies, all the way up to, thousands of employees and publicly traded companies. And Eugene, to your point, those different segments all have different needs. So I would say in the earlier stage, it's how are we growing and how do we actually get that right talent in? And it's the basic blocking and tackling of let's just get the basics in and let's get the basics right so that we can focus on scale. So we help through the benefits, but we also help through like setting up payroll, setting up your HRS systems and getting that out of the way. I would say as a company grows and evolves, as soon as there are, let's say, 50 employees or 100 employees, there's a lot more options that they need to think through in terms of how they can negotiate on the health plan and help manage those costs. Because I guess not kept secret in healthcare is like when you're actually managing costs, that's steering coverage, and that's the cost of your care is directly related to what your utilization in the system is. So if you use the system more, your costs are going to go up. I think collectively here it's intuitive, but I think coming from like an outsider's perspective, like why is it X, right? And how come costs aren't like half of it? And I think there's a dynamic too where we kind of discuss like healthcare as a whole. When you think about costs in the system, that's also revenue in the system too. And so I think there's kind of this, unspoken like thing where collectively when we're talking about healthcare and managing costs and all that stuff, everybody's in it for their own reasons. And there's a lot of misaligned incentives in the healthcare system, right? So that was a long way of answering your other question, but what are upmarket customers looking for? I think there's still, when we're serving our clients and when we're looking to look at the space, there's still such a need for mental health services. Still coming out of the pandemic, and because of the shortage of supply on therapists out there, people still need to get access to the care they need to be able to talk through all those things. I think the women's health sector is really interesting too, because you know, there hasn't been enough focus in there, and I'm feeling really at least bullish and positive about all the innovations and all the ways that we are looking at that holistically from an industry perspective. And then,
sorry, I'll pause you here just to throw a big kudos. I think, was it yesterday or today? I'm a little behind in the news, but Flow raised 200 million. So, you know, Dmitry and team, man, I still remember meeting these guys in Minsk back in the day. It's amazing, like how they've grown. And I know they've tried kind of the employer route as well. To be honest, I don't know if they're doing much there these days, but so to your point, you know, obviously they've been growing and they've been hitting, you know, all kinds of crazy engagement numbers. So
yeah,
just interrupting here on women's health.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think there's a lot of places that certainly are areas for improvement for where we go with this. I mean, one of the bigger fields I say in the next, let's say 3 to 5 years, is the caregiving space. Because as we look at different generations in the workforce, you know, we have almost 5 generations in the workforce, and a lot of people are caring for their parents, grandparents, and younger family members. And so I think building a system that really supports everybody from that perspective is really important for employers to think about, so that their employees come to work and can focus on the job, not necessarily the externalities that surround themselves.
The sandwich generation we're stuck in.
Yeah, I'm in
it. In Ryan, and like what screams out at you as an actuary now that's had this like experience in Aetna?
I am not claiming I'm an actuary, by the way. There are far too many actuaries that have gone through that process that I can't hold a candle to.
Yeah, no, sorry. As someone with
aspiring one, right?
You know, as a nephew of an actuary,
sure.
As a nephew of an actuary, with all the experience that you have, but obviously an analytical and a perspective of the market, what opportunities scream out at you? Like, there must be something when you see the numbers and you're on the inside that says, you know, why aren't people developing solutions in X area? Like what, or even with a bit of forecast of how, like you're talking about the generations are coming up. What is anything screaming out saying, why aren't there companies in this area, or are things generally, is the market efficient in trying to address it?
It's a great question, and I really don't have a good answer for that, because and I almost distrust people that have a definitive 100% answer on this one, because healthcare is so complicated. I think there's a lot of areas that we can certainly improve on. I mean, everybody's bullish on AI and how it can bring efficiencies to both administrative side from provider side, but also from maybe health plan administration side. I would also say that, you know, some of the things that we are experiencing in healthcare, where frankly, there's a lot of great companies out there that are doing different things outside of like the traditional Anthem, United, Cigna of the world, right? And so, you know, designing direct primary care models, you know, there's captives out there in the marketplace, but there's still this energy around value-based care. I still feel very positive on all of that, and these are things that we have spoken about for decades. But if you kind of look historically, like we've gone through the HMOs, right? That wasn't the savior. We've gone through ACOs. I think in certain markets that has worked, in other areas it hasn't. And then now we're into this like direct primary care arrangement. So all to say, I think these are things that everybody's collectively thinking about, but nobody's necessarily cracked that nut. And I think it's also a dynamic of like how our system's set up. I do think that the, I guess, quote unquote winner of all this is, how do we, like, the winner of healthcare is going to be like, how do we actually think about engaging people to think about behavior change and to think about ways to improve their own health so that they're not necessarily a tax on the system, right? And so that's, to me, like the $1 trillion nut of like, can we get people to sleep, eat better, exercise, don't smoke, and eat healthier, right? And it's like the basic stuff, but we're looking for shortcuts around the system of like, I want, and culturally, like in the US too, it's, I'm going to pay for what I want, and I want to get what I want at that time. And so I think there's just this dichotomy of like culture clash in how we actually view healthcare.
We all know, to your point, the exercise and sleep, we all know what we need to do, right? And, Marina and I mean, this is part of the kind of our mantra at Your Coach, that, I think ultimately, whether you talk about a care plan for MSK and going to physical therapy, whether you're talking about, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned GLP-1s, right? As the rising piece kind of in the weight management piece, but if you really step back, a lot of the triggers, a lot of things that we do on a daily basis are somewhere related to your brain, your mental health state, your stressors throughout the day, right? And so this is kind of where we come in a way, right? Yes, it's not clinical, but how does it spread across, right? So I think this is kind of the interesting part about, there's tons of solutions, but at the end of the day, it comes down to our behaviors throughout the day. Yeah, we all know we need to sleep. Shit, I wish I can sleep for 7 hours and a half. As you continue, I gotta shut my puppy. Well, no longer puppy. No. I don't know if you guys can hear.
But it's much easier said than done. And I think we all know this, right?
Yeah, of course.
One of the big things that we talked about when I was over at Aetna was social determinants of health. I mean, that's still a big topic. Your zip code can be a bigger indicator of your health than your genetic code in a lot of ways, when you think about food deserts and when you think about access to care. And so I think there, again, taking a step back, like there's a lot of systemic things that we can all kind of think through. But from like a day-to-day perspective, for like how I think about the business of health and how we help our employers move through that dynamic, it really is like, how can we make things more affordable, and how can we help your employees get the right care at the right time?
And then when you look at these, when you think about these different systems, across the board right now of like managing all these behavioral change, mental health, what's exciting you in that area?
Yeah, there's a lot that's actually exciting me in that area. I mean, there's a lot of really cool solutions out there that leverage kind of the behavioral economics aspect of things and trying to meet people where they are. And I think at the end of the day, it's meeting people where they are. There's this really great behavioral economist, BJ Fogg. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has this kind of like behavior change model. And it's a really simple model of like, change happens when your motivation meets your ability and you get a prompt, right? And I use that in pretty much every day of my life, where I'm like, how can we help people affect change? Well, we got to make it easy in the first place, especially if they're not necessarily extremely motivated to. And if they are extremely motivated to, well, then they're not necessarily the people that we want to target, because it's the people that aren't actively working on their health that is probably incurring like 80% of the cost on our healthcare system.
He's got that, what is it? Tiny habits, I think, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny. I actually, I'm going to throw out Matthew Holt again. I actually met, I invited, when we created the New York chapter, Health 2.0 chapter back in the day, BJ Fogg was one of the speakers. Like I reached out, etc. we've tried actually getting BJ Fogg for a symposium or your coach symposium, and like I got ghosted. I mean, thank you, BJ. But the reason I bring it up is that actually, I mean, it's back to this, right? We just don't have enough people that are understanding behaviors, and I love this concept of, yes, tiny habits, but then he had a whole idea of train a trainer, right? Like, how can you spread this behavior change model through it? So I mean, there's just so much in sort of the neuroscience of it all in our behavior. It's just fascinating. So we can probably spend another hour just on that alone.
Oh yeah, I could nerd out on that one.
Yeah. All right. We'll geek out another time. So I think there's just so much more room to cover here, and love to keep going deeper, but we'll do that over a beer somewhere in the world.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Jim Joyce, off to you
Yeah,
for the famous question.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
But Ryan, where did you go to school?
UC San Diego.
Okay, so you're California, born and bred.
California born and bred. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So just walk with me here and picture yourself being invited back to UCC San Diego, and you're asked to give a keynote speech on transforming healthcare around the employer, around large insurance systems, and you've been nominated to give this keynote speech because of all the fantastic work you've done in the employer space. So you're receiving an award, you're giving this keynote speech, and at the end of you step off the stage, you see a young, handsome man comes walking up to you, and he starts staring at your shoelaces, and you recognize that he must be a extroverted actuary. And as a nephew of an actuary and a son of a CPA and pharmacist, he's looking at you, and he knows your background intimately. And he says, he described it. He almost has exactly the same background: a Californian, son of a pharmacist, son of a CPA. And he says, I'm starting a new company, and I think I've cracked behavioral change in a really transformative way, helping people manage their habits, get better health, sleep better. But I need advice from you. And you look at that young version of yourself and you ask him, what's the one piece of advice you give him as he starts his company?
I would say stay curious and take chances. So because I think you don't necessarily know you won't necessarily know what the exact answer is, but if you ask the right questions and you get connected with the right people, you will eventually get there.
Love it.
Love that. Hashtag stay curious. That's what we're going to do. Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. And
thank you guys. Great seeing you both.
Great seeing you. And, follow us, hit subscribe, pass it on, and we will be consistently inconsistent, but we'll try to see you next week.